Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to talk about something that I so much love to do. And I would say abortion storytelling is a taboo topic, particularly for us here in Nigeria. And it's something that so many media organizations do not explore. I can remember submitting a pitch back when I was working with Daily Trust newspaper about abortion. And so my editor looked at it and said, well, this I don't think this is a topic we'd like to explore on our paper. And so that gave me a sense of the fact that, okay, this is a taboo topic that we do not often put out there on our dailies, although this is a very, very important topic that we should explore. And so today I'm just going to be taking you through some of the nitty-gritties from my personal experiences on the field, covering stories of maternal health and just generally taboo topics that we do not explore as journalists in Nigeria. Yes, so the topic is investigative journalism and abortion storytelling. So an overview of this session is going to be the general understanding of journalism, which I know that most of us know. And the learning objectives is generally just to have a sense of how to go about reporting abortion stories and how you should approach your sources, and just generally how to report that kind of stories with integrity, and also making sure that your sources stay safe, in that regard. So we're going to be understanding the key principles and ethics of investigative journalism in the concept of reproductive health and abortion. We're also going to take a look at so many other concepts, just like you've seen on the slides, and then understanding investigative journalism and its effects on abortion storytelling generally. And so when we talk about journalism, basically is about the people we want to know that the media have made available to them. What is news that people want to know, and what has the media made available to them? This entails the collection, preparation, and distribution of news and related commentary and feature materials through mediums such as print and electronic media, as newspapers, magazines, and just any other form of media. And so news is an account of actual events which disrupts the status quo or which have the potential to cause disruption. And news may be defined as an accurate, unbiased account of the significant facts of a timely happening that is of interest to an audience. And so basically, these are the major items that we see in newsworthy stories. And when we talk about the principles of journalism, we know that truth matters. It has to be of public interest. And it has to come with that tenet of independence, which is the kernel of this principle that practitioners must inject into themselves, into whatever content of news they're trying to put out there. And when you talk about objectivity, it's very close to the principle of independence, which means avoiding bias in whatever content of report you're trying to do. And this is very, very important in investigative journalism. There's also the element of transparency and also attribution. And this is where you need to be very, very careful, particularly when you're doing abortion storytelling. As journalists, we are asked to always attribute our sources and say, this is where we got our information from. And this gets very, very tricky, particularly in abortion storytelling. Because it's a very, very sensitive topic, sometimes you need not to name your sources. Or for instance, if you're doing a story of maybe, say, a lady who had gone through an abortion and had consequences in the long run, sometimes your sources need to be protected. And this is where duty of care comes in. And that sometimes you just need to not name your sources at the end of the day, but still put your story out there and make sure that it gets the desired impact that you yearn for. Also, we talk about significance and relevance. And so the volume of information flying around is very, very high, and every story cannot be taken to mean public interest. And so you need to be able to filter from all of those information what is newsworthy and what is relevant to your audience and to the public you're trying to put this information out there for. And so there's also the principle of ethics and laws. There's a close link between ethics and law because both seek the betterment of society and also make for responsible citizenship. And sometimes in stories of abortion storytelling, there are cases where ethics and law sometimes come to bear. I can remember there's a story a colleague of mine did. It was a rape case. And so sometimes if you're not able to find balance in such cases, you get caught up in the web of lawsuits and defamation cases. And so same goes for situations like abortion storytelling. And one needs to be very, very careful in how you relate your sources of information, in how you approach your storytelling, and create that balance just for you not to be caught up in the web of, defamation cases, lawsuits, and also bearing in mind the issue of ethics. And so with all of these principles, then come investigative journalism, which is a kind of journalism that digs up what is wished to be buried. And this goes beyond the surface. It goes beyond daily news bulletins, daily news reports. It takes longer time. You need to do serious research, and it is also money. You need to invest funds in investigative journalism, and that's why they are the best kind of stories that come out at the end of the day. And so investigative journalism is the kind of journalism that digs up what is wished to be buried, and it focuses on the truth and helps in building the common person while pursuing the public good. And also, at the end of the day, what you want to do in society is advocate social change and also value reorientation. And so there are so many definition of what investigative journalism means. Like this one from John Ullman, cited in the World Bank, is the kind of reporting on matters of importance which some person or organizations wish to keep secret. And I think it goes beyond just persons or organizations. We've seen so many investigative pieces about, most of the time you see pieces about public office holders, embezzlement, stories of embezzlement, hoarding, and things like that. But there are stories about real people. For instance, abortion stories are stories that have gone unreported. So many stories out there, particularly in communities, that we don't get to hear. And for journalists, sometimes because it's tasking, it is time consuming, you need funds to execute such projects, we do not really explore such areas. And people in local communities are the ones that are mostly affected because they do not have a voice. And so your duty as an investigative journalism is to help put this information out there, to bring it to the public eye for those who can influence change, see their perspectives, spark new conversations, and eventually create healthy and better communities. It is a type of reporting concerned with revealing, uncovering, unearthing, exposing, digging facts, and it provides more than is seen in straight news, just like I've mentioned. And so it makes a story more factual. It's more intriguing, more revealing, more complete, more credible, more controversial. We like controversy. A lot of people like to see stories that have controversies in them. And so in your storytelling, those kind of narrative acts help give your story the attention that it deserves. And ultimately, you get to create that impact in society. Moving on. So in trying to do an investigative story, there are steps to investigative journalism. And for me, the first thing I do is research. What is the particular subject or issue that you're trying to address? There's a story I did about maternal health, a pitch that I submitted to the International Women's Media Foundation about maternal deaths. And so for me, that story was very, very personal to me because of some of the challenges I faced when I was trying to give birth to my son. I saw how doctors in government hospitals approach such cases and the neglect by doctors, individuals, and then I thought, okay, this is going to be even worse in communities where they do not have healthcare, where they do not have people who will come to their aid. Some don't even have good roads, good road network to actually even take some of these women out of those communities to receive maternal care. And so I pitched that story, and the goal for me was to let the public know that there are still communities in the 21st century that still go through these kind of situations that we don't get to hear at all. And this story was personal to me. And for me, if I have a deep connection with a story, I tell those stories better. And I'm sure that most of us here can understand where this is coming from. And so I pitched that story with the idea of letting people know that this is what's happening, and also to uncover some of the reasons why we see the high cases of maternal deaths in Nigeria. And through research and then going on, because sometimes you do research and then when you go to the field, a lot of things change. Maybe the direction of your angle changes. Maybe you uncover a new, you see something new or something more striking, and then say, well, I think I should switch and take the story from this other angle. And so research will help give you the background information of, okay, this is what's happening. This is how it's going. This is how I intend to do it. But when you go on the field, so many things change. Like for me, when I did that story and then I got the funds to do that story and went on the field, so many things changed. It was now not just about, okay, medical negligence. I saw firsthand how cultural norms and practices also contribute to the high rates of maternal deaths that we see in Nigeria. I visited a community where most of them are Fulanis, local Fulani people. And in the Fulani culture, if you are firstborn and you eventually get pregnant, you're allowed to say, okay, I'm pregnant, or I'm 2 months pregnant and I'm about to give birth. You are just supposed to be mute. And even when you have labor pains and you're struggling, you're not supposed to say anything. You're supposed to suck it up and just be brave and not say anything. And so this lady, she's just 17 years old, I think. Yes, 17 years old. She's pretty young, and she was having labor pains. But because of that norm in their culture, she couldn't say anything. And so she started bleeding. Eventually, very sad, she had a stillbirth. And then she was taken to the hospital, and then they had to operate to take out the dead baby. And so when I went to interview her in the hospital, her auntie was there, and I was like, I wanted to hear from her to tell me what her experience was like and why she had to just keep mute and go through all of that struggle and all of that pressure. And the auntie said she can't talk to me because she was the person that gave birth. And so it's all embroidered in cultural norms and practices. And this was something I discovered in the field. I didn't know about that. All I knew was I wanted to do a story about medical negligence. I saw how cultural norms and practices, not just medical negligence, was subjecting so many women to hardship and so many women dying, and we're losing children. And I also visited a community where they do not have power supply. They do not have medical supply in the local hospital. And I was fortunate to meet a woman who was who was at the verge of giving birth. And I took permission to actually film. And then they said it was fine. I could film. I could literally feel, because sometimes as journalists, we are not just telling these stories. We are affected by some of the stories that we tell eventually on the field, because we see so many things at the same time. And so I saw how this woman was struggling to give birth. There were no attendants in the hospital, and the only person that was attending to her at that time they were all male, young men. And so they were around the age of 20, 18 years old, and she was bleeding profusely, and she needed blood transfusion, and they do not have a blood bank. And so they just transfused someone's blood, directly into her without testing, without anything. And so after my research, I uncovered so many other things. And so these are some of the things that you see on the field. And it changes the direction of your storytelling. It changes the direction of what you are trying to put out there to tell society. And these are the kind of things that investigative journalists do. And so after going through research and then starting your investigation, knowing everything about the case, just like I said, you get to uncover so many things when you're on the field. Then comes one of the very difficult tasks that we go through in Nigeria. I know that so many journalists face this. Getting authorities to speak on your story is one of the very, very major challenge that we face as journalists in Nigeria, particularly investigative journalists, because they're always very scared that maybe journalists tend to coin their words or change their statements, or most of the time they are scared of being held accountable for some of these things that we uncover on the field. I remember going to the primary healthcare in Niger, which is one of my focus area when I did that investigation. I needed to talk to somebody from the primary healthcare to know, okay, what are they doing in this community? Why don't they have a proper healthcare structure? What has the government done to intervene? Has there been any advocacy? What have they really done to reach out to these women in those communities? And they declined. I kept calling, sending emails, talking to other people who knew these people, just to get headway, to get somebody to talk to me. But at the end of the day, I couldn't. And sometimes it can be very, very tasking to always say, well, I've tried reaching out to this authority, but they declined to comment, blah, blah, blah. I really do not like, I don't like, I think it's too vague that we always say, I tried reaching out to so person, but he was not responding, blah, 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 blah. But sometimes that is all we have, because you need to create that balance between, it gives your story more credibility, it gives it more power. And this is where advocacy comes in, where you bring in stakeholders just to engage, in your storytelling. And this is where journalists bringing that sort of engagement or strengthy and way at the end of the day. And so when you do that, the next thing you are supposed to do is re-examine your facts and sources. And just like I mentioned earlier, this is where it gets very, very tricky. You need to be sure of your sources, even though sometimes because of safety of your sources, or if it's going to get too dangerous, you need to they need to go unnamed. But it's always better to get your source. Okay, where is the source of information? Where did you get this from? So in the eventuality that you get caught up in a lawsuit or issue of ethics, you always have something to fall back to. And so after going through these 4 steps, the next thing you want to embark on is preparing your final report. And this part sometimes can be very, very tricky. It can take you a very, very long time if you are trying to craft a very, very compelling narrative. After going through the field, there's so much you've seen. There's a lot of psychological influence, mental influence that you have seen and gone through. And this is the point where you put all of those information down and craft a very compelling narrative that people can either read, see, watch, listen to, and understand that this is the message you're trying to pass across. Remember, as a journalist, your role is to break down complex, either statements, um, uh, sentences, words, use very, very simple words, you know, to craft your narrative. Okay, this is what the story is about. And through to the end, giving them like a narrative arc of what happened at the beginning. What did you realize that you're trying to on a note? It should be, the end of your story should be inspiring, something to give people hope. I know that a lot of the times we want to do investigative stories, you know, that are award-winning and we are suffering and things like that. But over time, so I was talking about your final report, and this is where you need to craft a very compelling narrative to give your audience a sense of how the story started, what happened along the way, and at the end of the day, end your story in a very happy note. Because over the years, there's been so many research about some of the negative narratives that we put out there, and this puts Africans, for instance, the Solution Journalism Network, and so many organizations are popping up to say, okay, people get tired of always seeing negative things. They get fatigued of seeing wars, hungry children, and so many negative things about Africa. So we need to always portray, if it, not to say we shouldn't cover those aspects, but we should always bring out the positive from at the end of the day. And so these are part of the subject or issue through research, station, confirm with relevant authorities, they craft a very. So after that, we're going to look at some of internal challenges and constraints that we face as journalists. This organization is going to allow you explore abortion storytelling because it's a taboo topic and it's in the North. And so this is really not something we are willing to explore at the moment. And so these are some of the challenges that you face. Another thing is logistics. It's also a major constraint to hindering very deep investigations in Nigeria. For instance, I've been meaning to do this story for so long, but because my media organization could not fund it, it stalled for a very long time. And I had to look out for funds elsewhere and then find a way to kind of pay for the logistics and at the end of the day, put my story out. And so reporters are not conducted in the air. Reports are not conducted in the air. The reporter needs to visit the places where he can gather the relevant facts and information that could make for a good report. But unfortunately, many media houses do not have the resources to acquire utility vehicles, pay for reporter hotel bills, and the resources needed to make copies of relevant documents. And so as fellows here, AHEAD and Gokwacha Institute is helping you navigate that path. I would say congratulations. It's helping you tell the stories by giving you, support for some of your projects that you intend to carry out at the end of the day. This is a constraint. And AHEAD and Gokmacha is trying to help you solve this issue. Another challenge, internal challenge, and also constraints is economic, and which is finance. Finance is crucial in media business. Every media organization needs financial resources to acquire the basic tools, equipment for smooth operation of the organization. And so this is also a challenge. And there's been so many conversation in recent time about media sustainability. How can we do that in the African climate? Is very, very challenging for us in this part of the world, but there's been so many deliberations ongoing, to try to carve a path and create a niche for how local media, can be sustainable at the end of the day. And also, one other thing is a motivation. And this means a drive, or what pushes a reporter to get the job done. We all know that salaries that journalists are paid is really nothing to, write home about. And so many journalists, they say, always want to collect, the brown envelope and things like that. And this is because of the nature of the environment that we find ourselves in. That is not to say that it is justified for journalists to, explore brown envelopes and all that, but because most local media organizations do not have the means, do not have that capacity to shoulder, some of these bills. Journalists are laid back, and it's like, okay, I can't do extra work. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. And so this is where passion comes to play. I can remember that all of the stories that I've worked on that have made impact and have received certain accolades have been stories that some of them I even funded myself. I had to source out fund myself from friends, individuals, just because of one thing that drives me, and that is passion. I know that some people might say, well, am I going to eat passion? Like we say in Nigeria, and a passion a good chop, things like that. But if you have passion for something, you always want to think of new ways to explore that thing. You always want to think of new ways to make that thing better. And so I had to, because I wanted to tell these stories, I look out for calls for opening funds for journalists, individuals who can support me to tell these stories. And at the end of the day, you have that, you feel fulfilled that you were able to tell the story at the end of the day. And that is your goal as a journalist, despite the fact that many journalists do not have the motivation, particularly local media is really, really very tough. But if you are willing and passion drives you, you would always find a way to make things work. So the external constraints, that we face as investigative journalists is threats to life and family. Being an investigative journalist is tough anywhere in the world, not just in Africa or in Nigeria, anywhere in the world. Being an investigative journalist is very tough. You receive threats. Just recently, there's an editor of Wikitimes in Bauchi, that's in northern Nigeria, and they do investigative journalism in that area. And so he published a story, I think it was an election day, and they went to the scene and they found women lamenting about how the governor has not really delivered on some of his promises. And he spoke to those women. They said this is what they felt, and they were not happy about it. And so at that point, they published that story, and then the governor sent his thugs to harass this individual. He was locked up for days. His family was worried. His mother cried for days. And so these are some of the scenarios that you see investigative journalists go through. But I was glad that the international community picked it up, local media organizations, associations also picked that up, to further help push that, okay, just because we're journalists doesn't mean we should be targeted. And so these are some of the constraints your life there's always a threat to your life. And there's also legal restrictions. For instance, the Official Secret Act and the National Security Act pose serious restrictions to investigative journalism. We know we always hear that there's freedom of information, the Freedom of Information Act, blah 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 blah. But I'll still say that the media is still not free in a country like Nigeria, and it's really very hard. And so sometimes you're forced to shut at certain truths, you're forced to shut at certain facts just because you are scared for your life. And also the issue I mentioned earlier, attitude of government. Government do not want to talk to you, particularly when your story or your pitch is in public interest. You need the voice of the government on your story. And most of the time, they do not want to talk to the press. They do not want to talk to the media. And so you keep calling, sending emails. You keep making all sorts of moves just to help give your story that credibility. But at the end of the day, you get declined. And it's really very tough. And it's very, very hard because you need these people to give balance to your story. Another issue is ethnic and religious constraints. Nigeria is a diverse nation. And so we have people of all sects. And we all know that this is a challenge for us, particularly in times, when it's election period. This is where we see upheaval of some of these things that happen. And so sometimes as investigative journalists, I've been assigned to cover stories in the church, Ista, and things like that. But I'm a Muslim. And so as a journalist, you should not conform to your biases. We all have biases as individuals, but if you are a journalist, you should not conform to those biases because eventually it affects the job. It affects your ethics and it affects the content that you put out there at the end of the day. And so ethnic and religious constraint is very, very big in Nigeria. And also this also reflects in some of the words that we use in our reportage. For instance, I worked at Daily Trust newspapers, which many people see as a northern newspaper. And so there are certain, and because it's a northern thing and it's associated with the Islamic religion, there are so many words you're not allowed to use. For instance, Islamist group, jihadist group, and things like that. And so you need to have knowledge of how to describe things in a context that is not going to be irritating or cause harm or cause upheaval, between any sect within your community. And also one other constraint is hostile sources. So there's a kind of fear associated with speaking with journalists on issues that are criminal in nature. And this fear springs from the possibility of the police going after those who volunteer information in an investigation. And this is why a lot of people, when you meet them to say, well, I'm working on this story and do you know anything about it? Were you there when this happened? And the person would be like, yes, I was there. I witnessed everything that happened. Okay, can you tell me what actually happened? Can you talk to me? Particularly, I do multimedia, and so it's even tougher for us who do multimedia because you need to record the person on camera. And it's like, well, I don't want my face to be on camera. I don't want to say anything about this. Okay, can you just say this and then you're going to go unnamed? People still have that fear. And it's because they do not want to be caught in the web of, hostile situations. And so these are some of the external constraints that investigative journalists face. And so, as I've mentioned earlier, the importance of investigative journalism in abortion storytelling is very, very, very important. And this is because you go just beyond what we see in daily news. You uncover what people do not know, and you give voice to the people involved or subjects involved in that story. And so you're giving people all sides to the story, and it's not one-sided, and it's not in a hurry. There's depth, there's facts, there's wittiness, there's juice, there's a narrative act to it that you take the people through whatever it is you're trying to tell them at the end of the day. So investigative journalists play a crucial role, in uncovering the complexities surrounding abortion. Just like I said, they delve deep into the subject matter, conducting thorough research, interviewing sources, and analyzing data to reveal important truths. Through their efforts, investigative journalists bring attention to the untold stories and shed light on the various perspectives and challenges associated with abortion, ultimately shaping our understanding and impacting societal discourse. And so investigative journalists employ a range of techniques and tools to uncover the truth in abortion storytelling. These may include conducting extensive interviews, analyzing legal documents, very, very important in investigative pieces, using data visualization. This is very nice because some of these data from documents are very, very complex to understand. And so as a journalist, it is very beautiful to find a way to break that data down, particularly when they have to do with numbers. And then when you break that down, it helps people understand what you're trying to say better. And so there's undercover reporting. And this is the part where investigative journalists love the most, even though it can be very, very dangerous. But this is the place where you see an investigative journalist immerse himself in the storytelling. And it gives it that authenticity to say, okay, this person is really uncovering the story, and he's even part of the story, giving us the narrative just the way it is. And also engaging with whistleblowers. And so by leveraging these investigative techniques, journalists can provide in-depth and compelling narratives that raise awareness, challenge misconceptions, and foster informed conversations about this complex and polarizing topics. Another thing that we need to put in mind when doing investigations is legal and ethical challenges in abortion storytelling. And so journalists must navigate various legal and ethical challenges. And this is very key in knowing some of the legal terms and legal issues associated with journalism and reporting. For instance, defamation cases. These are some of the major cases that we see. And it's like, okay, this person defamed me in a quote, or misquoted me, or said something I didn't say, or backlashed me in a statement. And so it is very, very, very important for you in the course of your investigations to keep records, whether it's emails that you sent, whether it's a voice note that you sent, whether there were pictures sent by somebody to you. You need to keep those materials very, very handy in case you get caught up, in a defamation case or any legal case in the course of your reporting. And so journalists must also be aware of and comply with legal frameworks governing abortion reporting in different jurisdictions to avoid potential legal repercussions and backlash. Well, at the moment, I don't think I know any legal frameworks governing abortion reporting in Nigeria. But I'm really glad that the conversation is popping up, and there's a lot of enlightenment in the public space about reporting abortion stories and how to report them better in order not to make them offensive or glaring, to the faces of women and things like that. And so you need to be careful when reporting stories like this that are very, 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 very complex, I would say. So by digging deep and shedding light on realities and complexities of these topics, you as a journalist would challenge existing narratives. And that is to say, well, you reported this way, but that is not how it is. From my research, from my investigation, I realized that this is what's different about this. And so you want to bring about social change and give a voice to marginalized communities, which are mostly those who are affected by some of these issues, and they do not have a voice. And so your job as an investigative journalist is to bring out the truth and help give these people a voice. And so you also have the power to shape public opinion on abortion by presenting, your research, facts, narratives, dispel myths, and provide nuanced understanding of the issue, that can lead to increased drive policy change in support of reproductive rights. However, journalists must navigate ethical consideration in doing this, is through human interest storytelling. And this is because people relate better to whatever it is you're trying to tell them when there's a human face on the issue. For instance, if you're doing a story about abortion, reproductive health rights for women, particularly when they had whether they want to have an abortion or not, safe abortion or not, it'll be better. It'll give your story more power if you find a lady, an individual who has had an experience in the past to give her own version of the story, putting that subject in front of that issue makes people relate to it better. It increases empathy, it sparks informed decisions, and potentially drive change. And because when there's somebody on the issue, it'll be like, well, there's this individual who has experienced similar thing, and I think this is something story more power. It gives it more credibility and eventually creates that change that we yearn for. And so investigative journalists have successfully shed light on the intricacies of a thorough research, compelling narratives, and ethical practices have not only informed the public, but also sparked important conversations. And this is to say, to explore investigative journalism. One of the greatest form of journalism that ultimately creates is collaborating between journalists, but in a different form. As a journalist, your job is to advocate, bring these issues out for policy makers to see, spark new conversations, engage with stakeholders to say, okay, this is what we've said go about tackling some of these challenges. An activist champion these causes. We see them move out there. Sometimes it's like that they're out there, trying to make that change. And so using activists in some of your pieces will help make your advocacy stronger, because most of these people have data, they have a couple of contacts you could leverage, and working together in collaboration would further amplify, the voices of some of the areas we're trying to look at. And it provides a platform for their stories and give a human face to the complex issues surrounding abortion. This collaboration has the potential to foster empathy, challenge societal norms, and push for more inclusive reproductive rights and policies. And so these are some of the major things that you need to look at when you're trying to do abortion storytelling. And so investigative journalism plays a crucial role in shaping public opinion. And as the media landscape evolves, journalists must adapt their methods to engage with younger digital native audiences, utilize data-driven storytelling, multimedia platforms, and collaborative reporting efforts. Investigative journalists can continue to unveil truths and shed light on the complexities of abortion-related issues, ensuring a more informed and empathic public discourse in the future. I have, as the editor of the Scoop Storytelling Initiative, I started the Scoop from, it was a TV program that I started, a human interest TV program that I started. I go to communities, see some of the issues they're facing. They talk about their issues on camera. We publish. And this is where I got to understand the power of human interest storytelling. And over time, I realized that this could be something bigger. And I just do some of this advocacy. And so you can use this platform to further amplify the role of your work. And this is to say, most of the time, if journalists do investigations, they don't put them out there. People do not know that this is what you've done. You need to put your work out there for the eyes to see, for people to see, to know that this is what's happening. It further amplifies your work, and at the end of the day, gives you the desired outcome that you yearn for. So as journalists, we need to continue to push our work out there. We need to continue to uncover the truths decisively, evoking, making sure that our sources are safe as we tell their stories, making sure that we make them comfortable to talk to us individuals. And so these are some of the key things I shared with you today, and I hope this will be very, very helpful. Thank you.